All right, I need some groups of tables. If you only have 2 or 3 people, we need tables of like 4, 5, 6. Move closer if possible. Each table needs one of these packets. So choose some delegate from your table to come up and get the packet. This is interactive. You need to participate. You'll learn a lot. Or I'll at least run away from town afterwards. All right. Welcome to the business value of joy. If your table does not have a manila envelope that says something on it, wedding.com and super secret usually and do not open, your table needs one of these envelopes. Here's what we're going to do. Because I realize that there are some folks in here with the project management skill set. Sometimes that means a little bit CDO, right? You have to alphabetize the letters, so they're CDO. We're going to start with the conclusion, just to make those people uncomfortable. And if you don't like the conclusion, you can quickly leave and go somewhere else where you'd like to hear another speaker who has a message you want to hear. We'll talk a little bit about Menlo, because that's where I come from, and that's the context. I'm not a famous speaker on the idea of culture or joy. I can tell you what we do and share my experiences of organizations where we didn't have joy. Let's talk a little bit about culture based on what the experts say, and then we're going to compare tools and culture. We're going to go through a couple examples that I'll tell you. You're going to participate in one. And then I'll tell you where you can learn stuff by reading from the experts. And then hopefully plenty of time for question and answer, and I will have intrigued you enough to ask lots of good questions. So let's say for just the moment that you decided to quit your job. The car you left over in the parking structure has been sold for you. You now have some cash. You're going to start your own company, and you come to a software company, and we're going to build this product for you. But you're spending your own money. And I were to tell you that everybody in the room is equally qualified. Maybe these guys are a little bit smarter, their IQs are a little bit higher, they've got a little bit more experience. This side is a little bit easier to work with. They're more excited to be at work. They're thrilled to be here. These guys complain a lot, but they get the job done, right? These guys don't know all the answers, but they'll ask each other, they'll ask for help. Right? If I were to ask you, because I have capacity on each side of the room, where we should do your project, do you have a preference? The teams over here say over here. When we give tours of Menlo and ask executives this question, they invariably choose the side that we call joyful, the team that wants to be there. And then we ask why. And the answers we get from the executives: they will be more committed. They will be more innovative. They will actually try and figure out what the users want. They will try to be easy to work with, because they've all worked with the all-star teams that are a bloody pain and usually don't produce anything because they're busy fighting with each other instead of working as a team to compete with the outside world. Inside of this fictional organization, an interesting thing might be true, that all the teams are using the same processes and tools, and I would still have the same divide. The argument here is that the ultimate advantage comes from teamwork and culture, not from the tools. Tools can help support a culture, whichever culture you have. And if you're trying to change your culture without changing your tools or reward systems, it's going to be hard. So let's look a little bit at Menlo. Menlo is often referred to at Agile conferences as overly collaborative, a little bit overly agile. This is what our office looks like. That's one project. All the projects are in one 18,000 square foot room. To help you visualize that, this room easily fits inside of ours, right? We have one room with everybody working, one team across multiple projects. We use all sorts of interesting Agile techniques, right? We pair program, we have stand-ups, we use story cards. We do one-week iterations on projects that have hundreds of thousands of hours in them. We do projects in regulatory space, right? The one that everybody seems surprised at is we work within a fixed budget. This might not be a shock to anybody who's an actual manager, because those budgets are fixed. Doesn't matter if the team says, oh, we don't know, there's a budget allocation. And so we have to work within it and be aware of it. And that whole pairing thing, yeah, we do it. We do have a program available for those people who work in our space who don't want to pair all day long. It's called part-time employment. When we do work, it's part of what we do to sit next to somebody and share our work. It's part of the coding standard. If a programmer writes code without a partner, they have violated the coding standard. That code must come out. Now, it's really hard to tell if somebody's coding alone because they're in the middle of a room with all these other people who are like, you're typing on the keyboard and there's nobody near you. So the process police is not really hard to deal with because the team is all there supporting each other. So let's talk about what culture looks like. Kim Cameron from a little university up the street called Ann Arbor describes this as the fact that culture exists in all organizations. But the place you really see it, where it's exemplified, is just take any organization that's performing really well and go look inside. The culture will be obvious. Because the culture is part of what's powering them. It's part of what gives everybody their mission. It's part of what helps them all decide what the right answer is when they have a question. Hayworth is a manufacturer of office furniture. We'll ignore the fact that they might manufacture cubes for the moment. They recognize that culture is observable, right? And if you build a strong culture, it will show up in the bottom line. Apple has a strong culture. I'm not sure I actually want to work there, from what I've heard from outsiders or insiders who are now on the outside. Right? I admire their products. They have a strong culture. This is true of most of the companies you admire. So just to get a sense, how many people in the room are programmers? How many people in the room are project managers? How many people in the world are QA? How many of you are functional managers like me, which means don't do anything? Set free to go to conferences and tell people stuff. Let's talk about tools. Because again, this is what people want to do. We want to be agile. Menlo doesn't describe itself as agile. We describe ourselves in terms of the benefit we give to our customers. A tool typical in an agile type environment is continuous integration. Many programmers who've been elsewhere come to our organization and they're shocked because continuous integration in our world is a small plush toy. I would have brought it with us, but then the project would have stopped. So there's a small stuffed lamb, and only the pair that has the stuffed lamb can actually integrate. And so they stand up from their machine, they walk over to the integration computer, so everybody knows they're integrating, everybody knows who has the lamb, they sit down, they check in all their code, they run all the tests. If any tests pass, or if all the tests pass, they can check it in. If a single test fails, in a particular project that's 47,000 tests, doesn't matter if it's unrelated to you, you must fix it or you must check the code back out. You cannot break the main line build. It's amazing how many people come in and they want to automate this. If we put up the little stack of lights, it'll set off warnings if it automatically builds once an hour. We've done that. We tried that. The problem was whenever we put in that, I'll call it a toy now, nobody knew who broke it. Everybody else looked at it, said, oh my gosh, it's flashing, something's wrong, and then they all looked at each other. And then all kind of looked back at their shoes and looked really busy and hoped somebody else would take care of it, right? That didn't help. It was pretty, it was cool, you could talk about it on tours. It didn't actually work. It didn't help. What would help is if the team knew where the problem was first detected and somebody was automatically assigned the role of, you gotta fix this. And so by turning it into a manual process with a plush toy, the beauty of the plush toy is if you want to integrate and I've got it, I can throw it to you without fear of injury. Because programmers used to do that with hard toys. That was a bad idea. So we do continuous improvement of our continuous integration by trying to not injure people by changing the integration token. Why did we do that? It's not as high tech, it's not as cool. It worked better to get the outcomes by helping the people figure out how to work together. It's very simple. Estimation. Again, who are the project managers? I love this one. So I go to PMI conferences. I am a PMP. Your programmers love to estimate. Do you agree? No, that's crazy. Your definition of the word estimate is different than mine. Here's the test. Let's go find a really cool tool. On my iPhone, there's an application called WordLens. Anything that shows up in the middle of the camera, it's automatically translated when it finds English. So this is the breakfast menu in my hotel. If you look towards the top, in almost impossible to discern letters, you can see the English. Below it, you can see it in English. And there are certain words it was unable to translate because apparently cheddar does not appear in Italian. The rest automatically shows up in Italian. Now, if this is something your team will never, ever do, this is completely unrelated to your business, and you show it to them and they go, wow, that's pretty cool. And then you gather them and say, you know, just for fun, let's try and guess how hard it would be to build this. If we're going to go buy this company, how hard do we think they had to work? And they'll sit down and typically engage as long as it's not something that they fear will be used against them in the future. Estimation is a tool to help us try and figure out projects, but often it's actually used as a weapon to assign blame. And the programmers are so used to that word being associated with punishment, of course they don't want to estimate. But they actually do like to estimate as long as they don't think they're going to be punished. Right? And that's part, again, of what we look at as Agile. It's a cultural change. It's not, oh, let's put in brand new tools. The tools do not change the culture. So, do you use estimation in a way that the team members can share stuff that they're not really certain about? Right? We like to go to the experts and they give us a crisp answer. Have you ever gone to a programmer and they've given you a wishy-washy answer? Have you ever gone to a programmer and not getting a wishy-washy answer? Right? Sometimes it's because they honestly don't know. And so we have processes and strategies that we'll just turn that into a number. Do people get rewarded for making a mistake? If they give you a number and it's wrong, do they ever get rewarded for that? And therefore, will they ever likely want to give you an answer again that might be wrong? Often, estimation is being used to assign blame before the bad thing happens. Gosh, the programmers went on this track, they learned last time, and now they're like, I don't want to play. Shocking, that's really good. That's a good sign. That means you have a development team that learns. Now, if we could utilize that for good, it'll be actually a valuable tool. Ultimately, it is my assertion, the key cultural distinguishing characteristic here is, this is my team that's grumpy and brilliant and wonderful. They're working to avoid failure. I know it's not here in Columbus, but in very large companies in Detroit, you see this rampant. We got to get signatures and sign-offs and so forth. I'm like, okay, so if I sign the paper, does it increase the probability that the project will actually be successful when we deploy it? No. The purpose of it is to avoid blame on the failure end. Teams that are actually trying to succeed do something that's really weird. They make mistakes. They share those mistakes. They seek help because they don't believe they're going to be punished for sharing their mistakes. That's really awkward and scary for people. If you don't like seeing mistakes, then you should go work with a team that doesn't make mistakes. By the way, they make mistakes. You've just taught them not to tell you. Right? So, James talks and talks and talks. This is my night job. Okay, now, you must help me. If you're in the front and you actually followed directions so far and you're at a table with lots of people and you have one of those hold the manila envelopes up, if you're not in this group, you want to join one with a manila envelope, you want to squish together and get some more people together. There are more envelopes up here. but we'll need this to participate because you're going to do an exercise to explore culture. It's a fun exercise. None of your bosses will know about it unless they're in the room, in which case send them away. So squeeze together, get more. I have more envelopes in my suitcase. Usually I don't want to take them home because I have to carry them on the airplane, but that's not true today. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Keep working, get closer teams. I'm going to continue talking. We're going to do an exercise. You are going to go through a simulation. Your table is now a product team. You're going to build a product for the market. The product that you're going to build is a website, wedding.com. Users will go to this site to plan their weddings, and we're going to make money off of all the advertising. By the way, if your company still believes that, get a new job. Here's how it works. Please open the envelope and spread the materials out. You will need lots of room on the table, so push all the leftovers from previous hours off to one side. You're going to find a number of large sheets, 11 by 17 in 3 colors. There are 6 sheets. There are a number of small cards. These are index cards. You'll notice they're extra floppy because we photocopied them to lower the weight so my Prius would get better gas mileage. Inside that same packet are some additional materials. There's a persona that describes, I think, Mrs. Tober, Kathleen Tober. There's also some packets of all these same cards stapled together, and then some estimation sheets. Those are used for different exercises. You're free to look at them, but when you're confused, I don't understand how I'm supposed to use them, that's because you're not needing them. You're going to take these 6 sheets now and lay them out on the table, one end to the other. If you look at the tops, they say first release, second release, third release, right underneath wedding.com. In my set, the first release is yellow, the second release is blue, the third release is white. Each sheet, you have 6 sheets, each sheet represents $10,000 worth of budget. You have a budget of $60,000. 6 times 10,000, right? By the way, in addition to computer science, I do have an MBA. It's where they stuck a hot metal rod through my frontal cortex. So, this sheet is 2 people, remember we work in pairs, working for 1 week. By the way, we have a rule. 40-hour work week. I have had to put people on performance plans. I used to work in corporate America. That if they could not reduce their work hours below 42 hours, we were going to fire them. Everything that you know is backwards at Menlo. This sheet is 2 people working for 40 hours. That would be 80 hours. Assume project managers want to get paid and other stuff, so we'll just assume 20 hours overhead. That appeals to my MBA because that makes it 100. We'll assume an average rate of $100 an hour. 100 times 100, it's $10,000. You have $60,000 to spend. These cards talk about all the features. If you're not new to Agile and you've never seen a story card, here you go. This is a story card. Upper left-hand corner has a tracking ID, so they're all unique. There's a title at the top. There's a description of what the primary persona wants in the middle of the card. And in the upper right-hand corner, the copies have an estimate. If the estimate is 16, and you want us to work on that card, you're going to place it on the planning sheet, as so. If it's a 32-hour card, we've taped the 32-hour cards to a full-size sheet of paper, and it will cover the entire middle portion of that space. And it turns out there are these things called meetings. Guess what? Those are in our project plan. And you can't get rid of them. They're photocopied in. So you'll see there's a little thing for stand-up meeting. It happens every day, 15 minutes. We estimate that's about an hour. Every week we have a show and tell. We're very pretentious. Right? So we're going to meet with the customer, show them what we did, get some feedback. So there's 8 hours worth of meetings. So you get to plan 32 hours worth of features. The 32-hour card is twice the size of the 16 just to make it visually easy for you to do the calculations. There are also cards that have smaller estimates. If you have a card with an 8-hour estimate, which I had cleverly set aside, but I don't know where it is, so we'll pretend, oh good, 8 hours. You will now have to take on the role of the project manager. If you have one at your table, consider yourself at an advantage. They will show you now how to fold an 8-hour card in half, lengthwise. The 8-hour card is now half the size of a 16-hour card. What do you do with a 4-hour card? Fold it in half twice. And then that way, we can visually see how much time each of these features take, so it's easier to lay them out and have a discussion. I'm going to give you approximately 15 minutes to decide what features are in, what features are out. You could have to figure out which things go in your first release, which is for your trade show. The description at the top of the colored sheets tells you so. The next 2 sheets, the second release, is for beta users. Somebody's going to start using it. And by the end of the third release, you've run out of money. It's going to be brilliant, and all the advertising money is going to flow in, and you can buy your car back, if you're lucky. By the way, all the cards do not fit on the plan. We're simulating a software project. The scope is larger than the budget. You have to choose what's in and what's out. I am going to choose to interrupt you a couple times, but I would like you to start by proceeding. Go. And if you're at a table without this, move to a table with the materials, or come get the materials. It works a lot better if you play. Or you can use, there's 2 sheets, meaning you can schedule up to 64 hours for each release.
Let's be cheap. Let's give them half of the back.
I'm not sure that's going to give Steve points.
Never get money back.
Okay, let me interrupt. So here's where we're going to start. There's a couple first challenges I want to address. You want to make sure you actually fold the cards, so somebody at your table is compulsive enough to help you take care of that. There are 6 sheets, so you can put as many cards that will fit on 6 sheets. There are 2 colors there, but you usually spread them all out. If you don't want all 6 sheets, that's fine. I'm willing to take some of the budget back and give it to a different department. More importantly, if you do not have a plan in the next 3 minutes, I will take the budget back that's not covered with exactly the right amount of scope. Because what happens to unused budget? It gets taken away. Better than that, it gets deducted from next year, because clearly you didn't need it this year. Right? Any CFOs in the room? So hold on. I know you're trying to get this immediate. The problem is, all right, focus, focus, focus. I won't start the 3 minutes yet. Focus, focus. Pretend I'm the project manager, you're the developers. Focus. You don't want to look at the content of the cards. You're confused. You're trying to do what? You simply wish to fill the budget with exactly the right amount of scope. Stop prioritizing. Put it simply by size, because the CFO can't actually read project plans. Your job is to come up with a bad plan fast and then proceed to improve it. So simply cover the entire plan. Now you have 3 minutes. If I find an empty sheet that does not have the right amount, I will take it away. Wow, look at the energy in the room. Pick up. Deadlines are wonderful. One more constraint. Everybody must have touched one of the cards on the plan and moved them around so that the people with dominant personality disorder do not take over the exercise.
All right, you.
far as actually for it to create the image that came out first. You want to customize your home page and be able to, I don't know what
You know, you're the Frank Gates.
10,000, 20,000. Does anybody ever come to you and ask for a finished project plan before it was supposed to be finished? Never. Did you notice when we had nothing on the table how hard it was to make that first step because the thing I lay down might be wrong? But as soon as James made you build a bad plan, it was very easy to criticize it and start fixing. It's amazing how that inhibitor of fear of being punished for making a bad decision will stop you from getting anything done. And now you've got to read everything and characterize it all and prioritize. And we're going to set a pile over here of all the high priority cards and all the low priority cards. Well, the low priority card because we have to have one, right? And all the other things are medium high. You may have seen this in some projects, again, if you are visiting outside of town, because I know in Columbus this doesn't happen, right? So most of you figured out how to actually do the exercise without an extensive training program. Here's a really interesting, mind-shattering thing for some people. This is not a simulation. We built the organ transplant information system for the University of Michigan Hospital. Yeah, it's that Michigan place again. But for the University of Michigan Hospital that has to track every organ recipient for the rest of their lives using story cards planned out this way. We built a medical device. 8 years, hundreds of thousands of hours. This is exactly how we plan. We have found, just like you just experienced, when we plan this way, people are more engaged, they're more excited, they're more interested. By the way, I love PMI conferences where I now get to ask, were you more excited about this project that you're never going to do than the project you're actually working on back at your office? Oh, and it might apply in here too, right? That's a little scary, right? Why is this one fun? Why was this engaging on a relative scale? What was different about it? Somebody shout it out. So you're not going to get punished with it. What else? Sorry? There was no risk, okay. There's risk to our clients, but they still play. Was it more interesting that it was collaborative, that it was a shared experience? You're not sitting in your cube making a set of answers that everybody's going to criticize because now there's other people playing. Is it actually kind of interesting? Many tables actually stood up, moved around, got their blood flowing. It kind of pulls you into that. Matter of fact, when we do planning, there are no chairs near the tables. We've often seen meetings like this and participated in, where we're going to make the team efficient by putting the project manager at the front of the room. They're going to plug their laptop into the projector. It's usually right after lunch, and I can't see the projector because I'm a little bit older, so we have to dim the lights. And now we're going to improve the project plan, and 3 people think of something, but by the time the second person has actually said what they're going to say, the third person has kind of given up. And 50% of the dialogue in every one of these meetings I have ever attended is about the tool. Well, use Command-Shift this. We'll go over here and rebalance that. Oh, well, you can do this, this, and this, right? It's a giant tech support meeting with 10 people in the room, most of whom are now falling asleep or have given up or not worried because that's not their part of the project. Or they're just banging their head on the table because they're the ones spending the money on this meeting, right? This doesn't have the same outcome. But it's so weird. These are childish toys. Colored paper, you fold them. It works better. It's simple, but here's the other part. It's not easy. Because on a real project, you'll notice most of it didn't fit. Matter of fact, that's the most interesting part of this exercise, is look at all the scope that's on the table that's not going to fit. Now let's take all of those cards. Please scoop up the ones that are on the table, not on the plan. Scoop them all up. And pick any one planning sheet and dump all of them on that one planning sheet. Just pick one, dump them all on that one planning sheet. We're going to get us a superstar programmer who's going to rock through all of those. And the reason we know they're a superstar is because they told us they were a superstar in the interview. So now they have 10 times what everybody else has for 1 week. In our world, there'd be 2 people because they're paired, but in yours, probably not. Is that person actually going to get all those cards done? No. So if they don't get them all done, how will they decide which ones to actually do? Sorry? Yell. Priority. Which priority? Easiest ones. What's your role? Interestingly, more often than not, the programmers say the hard ones because they're challenging and fun. The ones who've actually given up on their organization will privately tell us the ones that actually build my resume the best. And there are many who actually try and pick out the best stories for the user. The problem is that they've never met a user in their lives. They don't understand the regulations in your industry. They have fantasies about how the real world works. So when they prioritize, guess what? They're going to prioritize it different than the business people, different than your project manager, different than every other programmer. If you overload all the programmers, you might as well go get dice and prioritize by rolling dice, because that's going to be what the outcome feels like. Worst possible scenario, a very diligent programmer does 5% of every one of those cards. Nothing's done and everything's in progress. The system can't compile, we can't test it because, oh, well, we have a little bit of everything done. What this system does, subtly, is it moves everything from high, medium, and low to a linear priority, right? Take the section 1 card, we just pick arbitrarily the one on the top left, and that's top priority, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. We simply establish priority with this planning system. It's now a work queue where there's a next, next, next. So we have priority 1 card, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4. Nothing is actually tied. But when you ask people to do that, they can't. When we have them physically sort them on the table, most can. And then they see all the things out on the table, and they're like, what are we going to do with all this stuff that we're missing? Well, you can either get more budget, we can go write new cards that might be smaller, or if you really want to be exciting, we can go lower the estimates and pretend that lowering the estimate will change the actual effort required. Unfortunately, there is very little data to show that there's any kind of correlation between lowering an estimate, reducing the actual effort required. Or we can tell everybody to work smarter. And I would suggest passing out vitamins. The other interesting aspect of this is when we get a passionate debate, which may have occurred at your table because maybe you're friendly with somebody, this doesn't happen anymore. When you sit in a meeting and talk about an ephemeral concept, people start moving their hands like this. And then when they have a point to make, they point at you, because there's nothing else to point at. Most of the time when we're arguing about this plan, where do we point? We point at the physical card, because that's what we're arguing about. If you pull this out and aim it at somebody, their heart rate immediately goes up, they immediately panic, the brain stops functioning, and they go defensive, even if they don't want to. But we want teams to be passionate. We want them to put all the data out there, because if they're not putting the data out there, it's not helping us, right? So we want a little bit of passion. We want a little bit of contradiction and fighting at the table, but it's about the content, not about each other. Nice and loud, please.
Yes, sorry. You said when you have all the extras on the table, say either go back in budget or re-estimate or whatever, what usually happens? What you normally do?
So we see a couple of different things. Clients get much better about sorting them when they realize they're not going to get them all. Or they do go get more budget for 1/3 of them. They figure out of that pile which ones are really important. Or in Menlo's case, they fire us. And we're good with that because if we actually work through the list, it's never going to work out that way. And there are some large companies that you work for, if you don't actually get the project done, they fire you and don't tell you, and all of your invoices become receivables. My wife does not believe that the local grocery stores will accept receivables in exchange for food. Having a failed project doesn't matter to us because it doesn't provide anything. When I was a director at Commerce One, now known as Commerce None, there were multi-million-dollar projects the client never paid us for. I got a bonus because I produced revenue. Doesn't matter that it provided cash because it never did, right? Client didn't declare they would never pay it for 6 months later. Then it's a bad debt. That's not real. That's fake. But we manage our lives that way in a way that you would never manage your own finances, I hope, right? So we're trying to change subtly using very simple tools, human behaviors, right? Nothing about this solves the problem that there's not enough budget. It just makes it obvious and makes it into data. You've always, when you've been on a project and there's not enough budget, you've told people, there's not enough budget, there's not enough budget. Problem is if you tell people that enough, it becomes noise. Oh, that's the project manager breathing again, right? I've heard it, yep, I've heard it, now let's move forward. Here, it's just laying there on the table and you're helping them make decisions. Not every person goes for this. We have people come visit us who say, this is dumb, we won't do it, we're going to do fixed price, and they go off to India, and then we see them 5 years later. Where can you learn more about this thinking? Because you can't learn all the cool things I would like to put into your head and give you all the experiences in an hour and 15 minutes. These are the 3 most important books. The 4th most important book is about my business partner's experience in building Menlo. I left it off, he's not here. Wasn't as important. If you have not read this book, Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and you attempt to do anything else you've seen at this conference, prepare to fail. You can implement a tool, it will be there. You must first build relationships between team members because the tools only function when there's a relationship. This is a really easy read. It's like 4 hours, a simple airplane ride. I could read it on the way back to Ann Arbor in my Toyota, except for your roads are really small and there's these big trucks. It's a story about a team, and it really hurts to read because, oh my gosh, I've been there. Oh my gosh, I've done that. Oh my gosh, that's the way we're behaving in this way. I've watched people and I've experienced where I literally cried going, oh my gosh, this really looks stupid, and I can see myself in it. And then he describes a simple model for if you want results, you need accountability. You cannot have accountability unless people actually committed, honestly committed, not just said commit, not just sign something. And you cannot have commitment without people having conflict. People will not have conflict unless they have trust. I will argue most of you like conflict, just like programmers like to estimate. But conflict at work is usually not trust-based. Anybody here play sports? I am attempting to take up space on a hockey team. I assure you, hockey is a conflict. I love it. It's great. My wife worries about all the injuries. When the kids from Saline High School get on the ice, I'm done. They are immortal. They don't understand it takes time to heal. I have no trust with them. When I'm playing hockey with somebody else 50 years old, they understand what the penalty is. If we both get hurt, okay, we understood. We trust, even though bad things can happen. But the kids from Saline High School do not get it. They will hurt me and just go on with their lives because a broken arm heals in like 3 or 4 days. Right? You don't have to go to the doctor. You just put a Band-Aid on it. Right? In my case, it takes 3 years of physical therapy after 3 years of healing. You need trust to have conflict. If you've ever had a niece, a nephew, a far distant relative, small child to come play checkers with you, if you intentionally lose every game, they lose interest and go away. Why? Because there's no conflict. Winning every time is sort of fun until you realize there's no chance of losing, so I'm not accomplishing anything. they want conflict wrapped around a certain level of trust because they don't want to be beat up and mocked. But they want conflict. How many of you have ever been to a movie? Imagine a movie with no conflict. My wife goes to these movies. I used to attend with her. Two people seated at a table in Italy having a dinner conversation. The camera does not pan back and forth. It does not switch from scene to scene. And at the end, you're sort of like, what was that about? Those are called art films. And the fascinating thing is you go into a theater and there are three of us. My wife, me, and some other person who appears to be asleep. Why? There's no conflict. It's not interesting. Look at all the television shows where people are excited to watch it. There's conflict. But they know the rules around the conflict and they feel safe, which means they're now able to open themselves up and play the game. If you want your team to give you valuable data, if you want them to be skin in the game in the project, they have to know that you're all going to go down together and that they're not going to be the sacrifice at the end of the project. Well, you know, it was the developers. Oh, it was the testers. The team has to know it will succeed or fail together, and they trust each of you, or they will not play open and honest. They must play defensively. Influencer talks about change. It's an incredibly powerful book. They don't talk about changing software teams. They talk about changing little things like parasites in South Africa, in the water supply, and getting people to change their behaviors around the water supply. They talk about projects of changing domestic violence in South America and the process of doing it. When they teach classes, often many of their instructors like to use the example I'm about to use. I don't skate fast enough. My fantasy is because I weigh too much. Some of you will laugh. I'm actually a very, very skinny guy, now a little bit carrying weight. I feel if I lost 20 pounds, I'd be a much better hockey player. It's a fantasy, okay? Let's just start there. If I simply had enough motivation, I should be able to get this done. Some of you may have tried this experiment in the past. You may know somebody. In order to lose weight, it's very simple. Consume fewer calories than you expend. The problem is, even though it's simple, it's not easy. Your body is programmed to avoid this because it is the first signs of starvation, and that would be bad. You'll die. So your body fights it. But it also turns out you having enough motivation will never overcome that. You must actually understand and make some sensible choices. But they argue this is not in your control. There's as much about your peers being motivated and them understanding and the structures around you. Imagine if you have a small bag of candy bars next to your bed. This probably won't help. Basically, they talk about these different items. Structure, this is a beautiful one. If you want teamwork and you send people back to their cubes, what are you going to get? This is why there's open collaborative spaces in many Agile teams, because it's a structural support to provide the motivation for teamwork. Why? Because you can see all of your other teammates are doing it. When you go back to your cubes and you try to use the new process, you don't know everybody else is doing it or not. You're playing bluff poker. Because everybody's seen the new wave come in and the new wave go out, and everybody who actually tried to buy in looks foolish. When you put everybody in an open collaborative space, and understand, if you just move them out there, it's going to fail. But if you build the culture for it, then they can see what everybody else is doing, and the poker game is much more interesting. Because they know who else is doing it, and they start doing monkey see, monkey do. That's how most humans learn, right? Babies learn very fast. Why? They watch you. And in the third book, for those who are not avowed Buckeyes, Practicing Positive Leadership by Kim Cameron. And instead of talking simply about SMART goals, he pushes beyond how do you actually build sustainable positive energy in a team? How do you make things affirmative? How do you achieve positive deviance? I love this. I always wanted to be a deviant. Who knew you could do it for good, right? And it turns out most humans wish to accomplish stuff when they're at work. Most of us did not sign up to work to go there and be, I just got to get through it. If I just hold on for 6 more years, I can retire. And after 6 years of practicing being bitter and quiet in here, the day I retire, I'm going to go out and be a happy-go-lucky person. Sure, you just practiced having a horrible retirement. Most of us at some point were excited to help with something. Most of us have had success in some part of our lives, and it was enjoyable, and you worked hard, and it was a positive experience. Kim's saying, what if we actually structured our business lives to try to achieve success instead of, as I described, avoiding failure? If you spend all of your energy in CYA, then there's no energy left to actually accomplish anything. So let's talk about Menlo briefly. Our mission is to eliminate human suffering as it relates to technology. I will now introduce how old I am. Imagine VCRs blinking 12 all across the nation. The only way to actually record a show is to own a 14-year-old. Time travel forward to 2014. Attempt to buy a phone, a telephone, for your 80-year-old mother-in-law. How do I actually get the phone to work? You send the 14-year-old in to help grandma use a phone, even though she's been using them successfully for 75 years. We have to train her over and over again. Why? Because the technologist provided, with great generosity, the thing they wanted, right? This is not a telephone. It's a really cool computer. My mother-in-law needs a telephone. And so often, technology teams build the things they want instead of what the team should build for what the users want. So we do what we call high-tech anthropology. Study users, design products, and then build them. Or give the design to the development team and hope they build it. This requires certain skill sets. As you may have heard earlier today, design thinking. So one of our key things. But design thinking by a couple of experts who sit in their cubes and come up with stuff that nobody else actually engages in is not very interesting. We need cross-functional teamwork. By the way, our teams all sit around the same tables. They don't have their own desks. You go sit at the project table. Well, what do you do when you're not on a project? You leave. Well, when I'm done with this project, then you get up and you go to another project table. What if I need to read my email? We don't use email. The customer is your most important teammate. Put your teammates first. And everything we do in our business must actually support all of these. Let me explain how this works. We interview differently. Teamwork's really important. The only question in the first interview, are you a team player? Does anybody know the answer we expect? Yes. So we could then, HR has taught me how to do this. Ask them to tell you a story about when they were a team player. Now, it turns out some of these people have actually gone to counselors who've armed them with that question and taught them a story to tell us, which might even be true. Now what we're interviewing is their storytelling skills. No, I want to know if they're a team player. So we invite 30 people together to interview for the same job at the same time together. So imagine all of you are here at a Menlo interview for the same job. Because we work in pairs, guess what? You interview in pairs. So the two of you, the two of you, the two of you, the two of you. And we're going to give you an exercise to work on, like this one, for 20 minutes. If the two of you are paired, your job is to make her look as good as possible. Your job is to make her look as good as possible. If you're paired with me, I'm sorry, that's really bad for you. So what we do to account for the fact that there might be old, McCrudgety, jaded people in the room, we do a second exercise, but now we juggle the pairs. So now you pair with her, now you're stuck with me, you pair, and so forth. So we do 3 different exercises. You sit across from a facilitator who doesn't ask you questions. They're there to answer your questions and help you make progress. They are a Menlonian deciding who's going to join the team. Then we send everybody else home. Our team has dinner, and we rank them. Second interviews are given out based on the kindergarten skills we saw. Because if we read somebody's resume, and they worked at Google, and then we talk to them, and they're very clever, by the time we get to, well, I don't know, they seem a little arrogant. Maybe, do you think they'll fit in? We'll work with them. That has never, ever worked out in my career. So we don't give you the tools to fall in love with them. The people who hire never see your resume. The second interview is not a bunch of trick questions. You come in, you sign a one-day contract, and you actually work on projects. It is the only thing I care about. If you can do well working on projects, we want you. If you're a single mom who's been out of the workforce for 5 years and you don't know how to spell the word Java, who cares? If you can make the team work faster when you sit down, excellent. Let's try a 3-week contract. If you're the most brilliant programmer who comes in and cannot engage with other human beings, don't care. We know it in 1 day. Goodbye. You also get promoted by your peers. We don't have annual reviews, we have feedback lunches. You sit with your peers, we bring in lunch, and they tell you what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. Because all of our clients can fire us at any time. And when our clients fire us, some people are going to go home. Your peers' paychecks are on the line based on your performance. So your peers decide who gets promoted. Some people often ask, well, what if they all vote everybody to have a raise? Well, that'll work for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then we'll go bankrupt. If they ever choose to do that, then we shouldn't be in business anymore, because they've given up on being a team. So, when you are functioning in your offices in the next upcoming week, and you do something out of reflex, the answer just comes right out of your mouth. You just solve a problem the normal way. Are you trying to succeed, or are you trying to avoid failure, of which I was taught many, many techniques? If you're trying to succeed, culture is the key. You must teach people to care about others more than they care about themselves, or you will not succeed. It's that simple. If you just put a bunch of new tools in, then you have a whole bunch of cool ways to track and assign blame. This may be appropriate for your organization. I would presume if you want to continue to take paychecks home, this may be appropriate. Do not go to work tomorrow and quit and say, James told me so. But the only person who can make the decision that you want to actually try and succeed, even with all the barriers in your way, is you. And then can you find like-minded people inside of the organization who also want to succeed, even if they look foolish, like our programmers down at the bottom, wearing Viking helmets while they estimate. They don't care. They're busy trying to get something done and succeed. Okay, there are 15 minutes for some question and answer. There is a web address up here. That is there in case you want to go, because you can actually find a link to the second chapter of the book. Buy lots of copies of the book. My partner will be very thrilled. Read this book first. Buy this one first. Read this one first. This will also tell you how to come take a tour. Last year we had 300 tours for 3,000 people, because they think it's so weird. This is where we started in 1999, literally in a factory called Interface Systems. This is where we are now. We are in the basement of a parking deck so that we can have 18,000 square feet unimpeded by walls. What can I answer for you? Stunned silence. Yep. So what happens with the estimates if they're wrong? Who comes up with them? And if you look in the pile of materials, there's actually a multiple choice quiz with all the story cards and then a sheet that says 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours. What the team does is they all sit down together once a week. They all estimate the cards together. They get to know who their partner is for the next week, and the different pairs may choose different estimates. The estimated cards get authorized by the customer this way. We then take 1 week's worth of cards, stick them up on the wall in what's called work authorization for those who are PMPs. If somebody's working on a card on the wall, we have this interesting rule: they're getting paid. If they're working on something that's not on the wall, they're not getting paid. We're a very blue-collar shop with white-collar people working in it. If you miss your estimate, your job is to tell the project manager as soon as you know you're going to miss the estimate. For some programmers who've estimated a card at 4 hours, they discover this 2 days in. It's a little odd, right? They get so focused and so excited, right? But as soon as you know, you tell them. You don't send them an email, you don't fill out a form. It's one big open room, you go, hey, Emily. She says, hey, what? Yeah, we're gonna miss our estimate. What's the new estimate? Well, that 4-hour card, we've already put in 16 hours and gonna take 8 more. We expect this to happen where they're gonna miss their estimate a lot. Matter of fact, we expect they're gonna get their estimate TWO, 2% of the time. There are these wonderful skills I was taught in business school and in my math degree called statistics. We believe this is actually a bell-shaped curve. It's a normal distribution. Most of the things are going to vary. Half of them will be over and half of them will be under if we've actually gotten the median or the mean to match up with where the estimates are. It means normally we'll be right 2% of the time. 49% of the time we'll come in under and everybody's so excited. 49% of the time we'll come in over and that's not so good. When somebody comes in over and you frown and say, no, that's not very good, what happens? They raise their estimate because they don't want to be punished, even socially, with a frown. You need to try harder. Well, the first thing to try harder is bump your estimate up. But the project managers know that, so they boil the estimate back out. And now what we do is we spend all of our energy negotiating and playing games with each other, trying to hide the fact that this is a random distribution and it's an estimate and we don't know the answer. So at Menlo, when you're over, we celebrate it. Counterintuitive. If you tell Emily that you're over your estimate or will be going over the estimate, Emily, the project manager, as well as Lisa and Carol and others, needs to do 2 things, preferably in the right order most of the time. They need to smile. They do better at that than I do, and say thank you. And if they don't mean it, the team will tell. They can detect inauthentic behavior. Because if you do not reward bad news, what happens to all future bad news? It just goes away until the project's 85% done, when it all shows up in 2 days in a row. Right? All projects 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80% done. And then suddenly somebody cracks under the pressure and they say, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it. And everybody goes, hey, my mistakes are littler than that. Let's put them on the table now. Right? Why? Because there's no trust. You know you're going to be punished for it.
What's the actual variance between the actual costs of the projects that come in and the budget project that you guys forecast?
So the budgets are always hit because if we go over the budget, then we're not getting paid. So we're time and material shop. So all projects finished. Now the question is how much scope slips, right? And so in that case, there's always something that slips because they've also made up new things along the way because we update this plan on a regular basis. So everybody's worried at that point, well, gee, James, how do you know that you're just not like taking everybody's money and then they're not satisfied? I'm willing to put skin in the game. We offer our clients the opportunity to pay us half in cash and half in stock, or half in cash and half in revenue share on the product they're shipping. If that product never ships, I will have done the work for half price and I will lose money. If the product does really well out in the marketplace, I will get more than my originally charged rates. We help build this software for a flow cytometer, a scientific device that helps researchers work on cancer projects. It took 5 years to ship the first version. The largest competitors on the planet were really pissed when we captured 33% of the worldwide market in unit sales. Tiny little company in Ann Arbor that we helped with do this. And so the big companies solved this the way big companies do. They launched an initiative called the Accuracy Killer. Right? They outspent us 10 to 1. Their product never shipped. Then the next strategy all large companies know to solve this problem is buy it. So they bought them, which is now why we know more about the insides of that because that's our sister product now. And all of the stock turned into cash in one day. We're willing to bet. We're willing to get in the boat with our customers. So rather than pretend you can shift the risk and reward from one to the other, we try and work together. Because ultimately, success on the project is the business, the technical team, and the other parties all working together as best they can, which is what this little planning game helps us do. But if you can't solve that through financial means or through incredible charisma, which I don't have, then it won't matter what tools you use, right? You need everybody to want to succeed. So we have to deal with bad news every single day. But if we get the bad news on the table, there's still time and money to do something about it. When it all shows up at the end, budget's done, time's done, and now the only thing we can do is assign blame. At Menlo, we've solved that. We've optimized that process. Anything goes wrong is James's fault. I'm an owner, so it's going to be true anyhow. But now we can skip that step and immediately go on to the second step, which is now what do we do? Because a blame assignment isn't really all that productive. Other questions? Oh, yes. So say it again. I missed the first part. So there's a recapture. Actually, we're the ones that actually usually win the budget because corporate America, they have this budget they have to spend, and then they go looking for projects, and they go, hey, Menlo, can you do one in a quick, right? So that's how we get projects. If there's remaining budget, we turn off the project and stop. That is a problem for some of our large automotive customers, in which case they always have a wish list of additional features that will fit if indeed the budget allows. So they plan on spending it all. We don't encourage that, and our small startup companies don't do that because we'd rather they spend that on marketing once they have a viable product. Besides, I don't want to do more work for them at half price until we find out whether it works. So we encourage them to spend less. Again, counterintuitive. So how does Lean and Six Sigma fit into our world? What's kind of beautiful is when we give these tours, right? Executive teams fly up in the corporate jet. 7th graders from a middle school come and take the tour. Teams like yourself come and take the tours. And there's always these various experts. A Lean team will come in and go, my gosh, how long did you study Lean in order to do all these things? It's like, we didn't. There's all this Six Sigma stuff here. We didn't. What about Agile? Well, we did. We did study Kent Beck and try to understand extreme programming because it was happening at Chrysler just down the road from us, and we knew the team members. But it's really quite simple. We found things that worked, and as Kent Beck says, we did more of it. We saw things that didn't actually add the outcome. We started doing less of them. This is the result 13 years later. So we read a lot. We study a lot. Everybody has heard the idea. If you have a meeting without chairs, they don't take as long. Everybody's heard the idea of stand-up. What's amazing is how many companies come through, and they all know about it, and they've never tried it. We have a stand-up every day. If there's 2 people in the office, we have a stand-up. If there's 85 people in the office, we have a stand-up. One stand-up, 85 people. It takes 13 minutes. So we pay less than average. We're now in a basement. We used to be on the 3rd floor, so there's less sunlight. They get to see the pain of the customers. They don't get shielded from it, so they feel pain. And most of them love being treated like a grown-up. Most of them love seeing products shipped. We do have people lured away. They get 50% raises to go somewhere else. I can't match the raise. Why? Because everybody at a pay grade, there's one number at each pay grade. And everybody knows each other's level. We all know what everybody else gets paid, so I can't change yours, right? So some people leave, 50% raise. Some of them come back and have to take the pay cut. We call those boomerangs. So some people go on, they want the corporate office, they want to rise in the hierarchy. We don't have a hierarchy, it's one team. If you ask them who the managers were, they would look at you like that is a moronic question. Who do they report to? And they point at each other. We didn't teach them to do that. So people who don't like being there ultimately leave. We don't make it easy to stay. And yes, you do see dogs in the office, and there is a baby in the office. Ellie is no longer there. She is the 8th Menlo baby. People bring their babies to work. We do not have daycare. They sit there at the table and work with you. We're weird. You have no idea how weird we are. Last question. So you struggle with story cards. Do you have a front end at all? Okay. So in our world, you'll notice all of these are front end stories. There are no back end cards. A story here includes every slice that you need to go down to. If it can't be measured by the business, we will not make it a story card. Well, batch processing produces output. So then we write story cards about the desired output. But if a story card can be finished and the user can't see the impact that it occurred, it can't be a story card in our world. How do you get good at writing these? We think it's about 1,000 to 2,000 cards that you have to write before you start getting good at it. It's practice. It's a physical skill. There's lots of books and suggestions, but if you memorize a format, that doesn't solve the culture problem of having a common understanding. That gets done through practice. If you really want the simplest technique, write the entire project on one index card. Everything you can cram in on one index card, sort of like when you used to study for midterms at high school. Write everything you can. Have the team estimate it. Well, that project's 6 months. Okay, you are now obligated to break that into smaller pieces. Project managers, this is called a decomposition of a work breakdown structure. We write the top card, now we write 4 cards, we estimate those, and so each level of cards just makes the project smaller and more detailed. Every one of them has to be something that the customer would see value in, or we just don't schedule it. So we have no stories for building a database table. That's just part of another card. Because our users don't care. They just want the data saved. If these stories are not written in a way your business sponsor understands, they will not come participate. All you did is translate the gobbledygook that's in Microsoft Project into this. This is to get them to play, to actually steer, make trade-off choices. If you don't give them a way to make trade-off choices, then you cannot expect them to make trade-off choices other than, I know, let's get rid of testing. So one here at the end, let's just get rid of that. Don't put in bugs. It's the only choice you gave them. It's all hard. Or actually, it's all really simple. It's just not easy. Feel free to take some of these materials with you. I also, over here on the side, have a list of the various workshops we have, a ticket that shows you where the book is, my business cards, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. Thank you for participating.